Sound waves. Those things that go zooming around Earth, rattling our eardrums so we can hear stuff. If you want to advance your sound wave knowledge from noob level up to pro skills and even hacker expertise without grinding lectures, this is the video for you. Well, if you thought you had it easy with a free pass straight to being a hacker in sound waves, you're wrong. We've got to start with the noob levels, aka wave basics. Now, the most basic thing we can start with is the two main types of mechanical waves: transverse and longitudinal. You're most likely more familiar with transverse waves. They look like this. Now, they look like that because the wave is vibrating parallel to the direction the wave is traveling. The most common example would be the ocean. Now, the other kind of wave is the longitudinal waves. These are less commonly used to represent waves in general. They look like this. Instead of the hills and valleys of transverse waves, longitudinal waves are pulses of compression in a medium, like a slinky. Sound is a longitudinal wave. Let me demonstrate. Here, we have our source of energy sending out pulses of compression. Now, I mentioned the word medium without explaining. If you've taken a look at the periodic table, you've noticed that waves aren't on it. They aren't their own type of matter, rather an increase of energy in a material. What are those materials? Well, here we have the three mediums of sound waves: gas, liquids, and solids. Sound waves can pass through any of these three materials. Lastly, let's take a look at names and measurements of parts of the wave. The height of the wave is measured from crest to this point of the wave, called the equilibrium, and it's called amplitude. The length of waves is measured from crest to crest, or trough to trough, and it's called wavelength. The amount of waves is measured by waves per second, and it's called frequency, or more commonly, hertz. And lastly, the speed of a wave is measured by that formula, or speed equals wavelength times frequency. Well, that about does it for wave basics. Now that we've set the foundation, let's move to some more advanced topics, mainly energy. Let's begin with how wave energy is affected by the medium a sound travels in. Waves, as you know, are pulses of energy. When they bump into another molecule, they lose energy, but get boosted. Think slime blocks. So, with gas, sound waves don't lose much energy, but travel slowly, because there's not much boosting going on. In a liquid, that's the midpoint, with medium speed and medium distance. Solids give a lot of boost, but because of all that density, a lot of energy is lost. Next, reflection versus absorption. When sound changes mediums, one of two things happen. Sound will either reflect or be absorbed. The rule of thumb is the softer the material, the more will be absorbed. So here, concrete is very hard. Concrete rooms echo. That would be reflection. Wool is a lot softer, and so much more sound will be absorbed. And lastly, you have honey, which is basically liquid, incredibly soft. So lots, if not all, of the sound waves will be absorbed. Next, let's talk about the effects of energy and amplitude. Loudness. As energy increases, amplitude increases, which then increases the volume we hear. The unit of measurement is called decibels. So, here, low energy means low amplitude, a small wave. Medium energy means medium amplitude, a medium wave. High energy makes a high amplitude wave, which translates into decibels. The scale goes from 0 to 120. At 0 decibels, you can't hear anything. 40 decibels is about how loud the human voice is. 60 decibels is the midpoint. 80 decibels is heavy machinery. And 120 decibels is when you receive hearing damage and you go deaf and can't hear anything again. Now we can move on to what makes sounds unique. Overtones. The slabs here on this wall are the main sound, and the trapdoors represent the overtones. So here we have our main sound being produced, and then we have two different layers of overtones. The overtones change and add to the main pitch of the sound being made, so it sounds different. Next, the other cause of unique sounds is resonance. Resonance is when the length of the wave emitted can bounce in its own length. Yes, sound waves do have lengths, but specifics is not needed for understanding. Everything on Earth has a resonance happy spot, and I'll illustrate how it works. Here we have a track. This track represents the space. Now these minecarts here represent our sound wave that's traveling around. Whenever a new sound wave is emitted, like types get picked up by the next. Now that the wave has been emitted and the like types have picked each other up, you can now see that we have a great big old clump of minecarts, or sound waves. Congratulations, you're now a sound wave hacker. Let's talk about how sound waves apply to everyday life. Let's start with instruments. With stringed instruments, they make sound by a string vibrating. The string vibrating creates the pulses of energy that we hear as sound. The rule of thumb is the smaller the string, the higher the pitch. The shorter the string, the higher the pitch, and the tighter the string, the higher the pitch. When the string is overall smaller in size, that means it vibrates more quickly, creating a higher frequency, which we hear as a higher pitch. Also, the odd shapes of string instruments is for a reason. It's to allow more tones and pitches to resonate. For example, if your guitar was just a rectangle, only a handful of notes would actually ring out, and all the rest would be just dry. With woodwind instruments, air blown through the instrument causes a reed to vibrate. An instrument is a resonator, an amplifier. All the holes and levers change the resonance happy spot, or what pitch we end up hearing. So like strings, the faster the reed vibrates, the higher the pitch that we hear. And when only a few holes or levers are used, the instrument is shorter and allows that higher note to resonate. Brass instruments work by the player creating a vibration with their lips, and the instrument is literally just an amplifier and resonator. The three knobs on trumpets and the levers on other brass instruments adjust the instrument's resonance, and the trombone, well, it's just the simplest. Digital instruments is where it gets really fun. Sound waves are created by a computer, which controls the overtones and resonance artificially, then sends those specifics to a speaker. Let me take a quick detour to demonstrate how speakers work. Here is our speaker. When it's powered on, it vibrates. Then lastly, sonar. Basically, a speaker sends out a simple wave, and then another system receives the waves that are reflected back. As you know, hard things reflect waves. So, then using math, you can determine the distance and speed of that solid object that the waves were reflected off of. Lastly, let's talk about waves in rooms. For simplicity's sake, we'll have two types of rooms. Rooms with 90-degree angles and less, and rooms with obtuse angles. In rooms with acute and right angles, sound echoes a lot more, as there are more changes in mediums for the sound to reflect off of. But with all obtuse angles, as the sound doesn't reflect off of one wall and onto another as much, there's not as much echo. So, that makes all acute and right angles bad for speaking, as echo in speech makes it a little bit more confusing. On the other hand, speech without echo is a lot easier to understand. But most instrumental music sounds nice with a bit of reverb or echo. And so, rooms without that would sound a little dry. But rooms with acute angles and 90-degree angles create a lot of echo and reverb, which makes it sound overall more pleasant. Oh, what's that sound? Supersonics. Really quickly, we'll touch on this. Sound is emitted like this, going out in all directions from the source of energy. Now, when an object goes faster than the speed of sound, the waves condense and all add up, increasing amplitude into a big Congratulations, you've now done it. You have obtained a broad and narrow look at sound waves, starting with the basics and finishing with some very advanced concepts to kickstart your journey with sound waves. And with the posting of this video, I will have completed my freshman year in high school. You're welcome.